Hello to you all, and welcome to another of the Welshful Company of Hackney Carriage Drivers history videos. I hope you're all keeping well. My name is Steve Bates. I am the head tutor of the company's cab guide course and the coordinator. I have been a holder of the cab guide badge for 8 years and also a Clerkenwell and Islington tour guide badge for 7 years. And it is with that hat on, the Clerkenwell hat on, that I present today's video, which is, as you can see from the picture on the screen, of St John's Gate. For 19 years as a London taxi driver, I had appreciated this building, loved the look of it, but never really understood it. And I should imagine that goes for many of you out there. So I'm glad to be able to give you a rough idea of what it's all about and why it's there. So the history of the Order of St John goes back to the 1080s, when a lay preacher and pilgrim called Gerard Tom travels from Amalfi to the Holy Land. He is distraught by the state of the pilgrims, his fellow pilgrims that are arriving there from all over Europe, the dishevelled and poor and very hungry group that have made their way. And so he opens a hospital to care for them, to feed them, and to get them back on their way. It's not a great time, to be honest, to choose to build a hospital in Jerusalem, because coming up right behind the Brother Gerard in 1099 is the beginning of the Crusades, a period of a good 300-400 years where Christian Europeans attempt to seize control of Jerusalem and the Holy Land from the Saracens, or Muslims as we would know them today. So this would be nothing to Brother Gerard. He would treat everybody. There was no rhyme or reason or different faiths that he wouldn't treat in his hospital. But things were becoming dangerous, and so first Grand Master of the Order, this guy Raymond decides that the Order will have to start protecting itself in light of the constant battles going on around their ears. And as you can see here, the boy is still very much led by his faith, by holding his crucifix, but he is also holding a very large sword in his right hand. On his chest, you will see the cross of St John, originally the Amalfi cross, so we believe it was brought to the Order or used as the Order symbol by Brother Gerard, and it was quickly adopted by the Knights as a symbol of their key aims in life, which were prudence, fortitude, temperance, and justice. It was also used to remind them of the 8 Beatitudes described by Christ on the Sermon on the Mount. Also quite handily used within the 12th century to represent the 8 different regions. You can see the 8 crosses here. I did say 8, but you can see the 8 points on the cross. The 8 regions or priories around Europe that were set up to fund the Order and to provide it with knights and medical men and monks. These priories were Provence, Auvergne, France, Castile, Aragon, England, Italy, and Germany. In Clerkenwell, the church was originally built in 1123, and this is the crypt of the church. It is the oldest Norman crypt in London. An interesting point: as you walk into the crypt, you will see Romanesque rounded arches as you build of the original building. As it was extended, ready for the visit of the Grand Prior from Jerusalem, then the architecture in that short space of time had changed to the pointed thick arches that you'll see here today. So we'll get back to the Knights' centre of the universe, which is the Middle East. Jerusalem is taken in 1191 by Saladin, leader of the Saracens, and the Order have to move there hospital to a place called Acre, which is in modern-day Palestine. They hold on to Acre for 100 years. Eventually, they're overrun. Whole of the Middle East and the Levant is taken by the Saracens, and so the Order of St. John, the Knights Hospitallers, as they are now known, along with the Knights Templars, move base to Cyprus. They hold on to Cyprus for around 20 years, when again they are removed by attacks by the Saracens. At that point, they are then given the island of Rhodes to protect by the Holy Roman Emperor and the Pope. It is around this time that the Templars, the Knights Templars, go out of existence. They become too powerful and are basically destroyed. It is said on Friday the 13th, which is where we believe that that auspicious date comes from. So in 1309, the Knights look after Rhodes, and you can see in the picture here, this is the Grand Master's Palace. If anybody has been to Rhodes, it's a fantastic, Rhodes City, should I say, the actual capital. It's a fantastic example of a medieval city. It's the best I've ever seen. You still have the hospital there, as you can see here, the Grand Master's Palace, the city walls. It's actually where I bought my St. John's cross that I wear all the time here. It's a gorgeous place. So this was their base for around the next 200 years. Meanwhile, just going by my pictures here, and at the same time, or during that period, to protect the island of Rhodes, the Knights built the castle of Bodrum. For anybody that has been to that part of Turkey, you would have seen this rather large castle looking over that seaside resort, and this was the original that was built by the Knights. The minaret that you'll see in the picture there was added once it was taken back by the Saracens and by the Ottomans. Just the point, coming back to Clerkenwell, again during that period, while the centre of the order are way over in Rhodes, you can just about make out in this picture the man in the middle, who was the Grand Prior of the Clerkenwell Priory, and was also Lord Chancellor of England. His name was Robert Howes, and anybody that does know a bit about English history will notice the day that he dies. Again, if you can make it out in this picture, it says 1381. That's the year of the Peasants' Revolt. Robert Howes was the man that brought in the poll tax, which started the Peasants' Revolt, and Howes was chased from here, Clerkenwell, where the peasants burnt down most of the priory, to the Tower of London, where he hid, was eventually found and taken outside and decapitated, as was the custom in those days. This man here, this is Sir Thomas Dockwra. So Dockwra is the man that actually built the gate that we see today. Dockwra was Grand Prior. He was a good friend of Henry VIII. He was present with Henry at a meeting of the Field of the Cloth of Gold in Calais. Some of you may know that picture of which is Hampton Court. It was a rather large folly, but a fantastic experience apparently for all those that were there. He was much admired. He was present for a number of the sieges during the Knights' time in Rhodes, because as you can imagine, they were under a constant siege. And he is remembered today because of his building of his work on the priory at Clerkenwell, by this, which is on the far side of St. John's Square, which is the Dockwra Memorial Garden. Anybody that recognises the name, Dockwra, D-O-C-W-R-A, it's his family are the ones that are part of Fancy Dockwra, those people that are normally standing at the end of a traffic queue with the road dug up. So 1522, we have the Siege of Rhodes. As I said, there have been a number of sieges at Rhodes, a number of attacks by the Saracens. This was the last and final siege. As throughout the battles that the Knights had during their time, they were heavily outnumbered. They fought gallantly. But eventually on this final siege, they had to leave. They were given great respect by the Saracens. Their leader by this time was a man called Suleiman the Magnificent, and he allowed them to leave with all of their treasures, all of their records, and he gave them safe passage out. It was a while before the knights had anywhere to move to next. They were used, as you study the history of the knights, you realise that they were used by the Pope and the Holy Roman Emperor to be put into places that were to be attacked. Now that the Templars are gone, these are the main fighting force of the Catholic Europeans. This is Gozo, where in 1565 the Saracens. Sorry, I've jumped ahead. I do beg your pardon. 1530, the Holy Roman Emperor gives the Knights Malta as their new home, and so it is the guy that you'll see here in the middle. Again, in this wall of friars of Clerkenwell, next to Thomas Dockwra, is Sir William Weston. William Weston was the prior of the order from 1527 till 1540, the prior in Clerkenwell. And he was the man that proudly sailed the Carrick, the Great Carrick, first ironclad ship, the Santa Anna, into Malta when the Knights had their new home, which they'd waited for 8 years. But this is where the separation comes with the order in England, because Henry VIII has fallen out with the Catholic Church because of his divorce of Catherine of Aragon. He dissolves the Catholic Church and all of the orders and priories and abbeys that includes around the country. Last order to be removed is the Knights of St John in Clerkenwell. William Weston begs Henry VIII, please do not close my order down. He knew that the writing was on the wall. Some 3 years earlier, the prior of Charterhouse, just around the corner in Clerkenwell, was decapitated and cut into quarters and nailed to his own gate in Charterhouse Square because he refused. Henry had a lot more respect for William and for the Knights because they were a fighting force, because they had been around for a long time and proved themselves as great knights and great fighters. He even offered or promised William Weston a pension of £1,000 a year, which you can imagine in those days was an absolute fortune. William loved his order. He was a prudent and possibly chaste man, as the knights should have been. He made his way back to the priory for a final time, where he died of a broken heart. You can see his tomb in the crypt of St John's Church. This is a memento, Weston's memento mori, which is on his tomb in the crypt of St John's Church in St John's Square. His tomb pieces were meant to be a reminder that although he was a great man, we all eventually turn to skeletons and then dust. So the order now dies in England. Knights who are still fighting with the order or living with the order in Malta, their families have their wealth removed, and Henry VIII starts to turn on the order completely. So much so that in the latter years of Henry VIII's reign, 1544, 1545, he openly starts to work with the Saracens and the Ottomans to turn against Catholic European countries. Anyway, so what happens now to the order? Well, we find that without any reason to exist as a religious order, Henry VIII takes over the lands, as he does with most of the Catholic Church's belongings, and uses the gate for keeping his tents. So it becomes the home of the lord or the master of the revels and tents, basically a storehouse. Excuse me. During the reign of Mary during the reign of Edward the Sixth, who is Henry VIII's son, Lord Somerset, who is his protector, destroys the church of St John's Church, and the rubble that remains is used to help build his palace on the embankment, now known as St Somerset House. So the one that's there now isn't the original. During the reign of Mary I, the order is briefly reinstated in England, but is quickly lost again when Elizabeth I takes the reins, takes over the country, and takes us back to being an Anglican country. Meanwhile, during this period in where it's all happening for the knights, I did scroll past here. In 1565, the Ottoman Empire, which is now the new force, the continuation of the Saracens and the Muslim force, attack the island of Gozo, a small island attached to Malta. The entire population are taken hostage in order to provoke the knights and try and draw them out. You can see here, this is a citadel on the island of Gozo in Victoria, which was built after these attacks to try and protect the island. So let's scroll through again. And then later in 1565, in July, a big attack is made to the island. So this is Mdina, which is in the centre of Malta. This was the old capital of Malta and where the knights held. And this is where they were hoping to make their stand against the force of Ottomans that were attacking the island. But they quickly realised that they were going to be outnumbered, and so they left Mdina and fled to the north to a place called Burgu, where they had a number of fortifications built. The numbers of the siege, and this is going by the Ottomans' numbers, there were around 40,000 Ottomans attacking the Knights of St John, or Knights Hospitallers, in the Great Siege of Malta, and they were attacking around 2,000 knights and 5,000 Maltese men that were fighting against them. So it was an enormous siege, one that's been written about many times, and became such a heroic defence by the knights that the Grand Master of the order at the time, a man called Jean de Valette, his name was given to the capital of Malta, so it's now known as Valletta. You can see in the picture there. This was the capital, and is the capital today of Malta. Everything you can see there is the fortifications built by the knights after they've managed to repel the Great Siege of Malta in 1565. This is Jean de Valette. We're going back to Clerkenwell, back here in London. Elizabeth I continues the use of the gate as being the home of the Master of the Revels. The job changes. He's not now the Master of the Tents and Revels, but just purely the Master of the Revels. His job, in the main, is to check on works written around the time by people like William Shakespeare, to ensure that there's nothing being written badly about Queen Elizabeth. The Tudors were rather a worried lot, what with their dealings with Europe. They were quite paranoid, and so all of 30 of Shakespeare's plays would have had to have been put on in St John's Gate, in what is now, we believe, what is now the council chamber, so that the Master of the Revels, and they were done in full costume to ensure that there was nothing derogatory being or surreptitiously put in about the royals. So, I'm jumping ahead. We were just looking at there. That's Robert Tilney, who was the Master of the Revels. Not much going on in the 17th century. The place starts to become rather dilapidated. Next time that the gate pops up is in the in the early 1700s. In 1703, a man called Edward Cave opens what's known as what became famously the Gentleman's Magazine. One of his main contributors is this fellow, Samuel Johnson. Johnson used to spend hours at St John's Gate, and his voice would echo along what we now know as St John's Lane, with his rather boisterous and vociferous rantings, thinking about what it was he would be writing in this month's issue. That slipped in there. That would have been one of Shakespeare's comedies. Comedies, Romeo and Juliet. I beg your pardon. Now we go right the way forward. Now we are looking at the 1800s in Clerkenwell. This fella comes into play. The gate has had a number of uses. It was now in the early 1800s. It's been used as a brewery. It had been a coffee house owned by William Hogarth's father, Richard. It became as it was Hogarth's Coffee House. It didn't work. It failed miserably because Hogarth wanted to give it a certain nuance. He insisted that everybody that drank in his coffee shop had to speak in Latin. He went out of business. Silly man. Yes, so say as we get to the 1800s, it's a brewery. It's the St John's Jerusalem Tavern. It's a pub, but it is now getting into a bad state of affairs. In 1845, the Metropolitan Board of Works insists that the brewery that owns the gate either makes substantial repairs or it is demolished. This guy who we're looking at here, this is Sir Edmund Latchmere. He, at the time, is going to school at Charterhouse around the corner, which was still in Clerkenwell before moving to Godalming in Surrey, where it is today. He regularly would walk on his way to school, would walk past this gorgeous Tudor gatehouse, and would love one day to be a knight and to be able to say it was his own. The fund is set up to try and save it by Freemasons to save the gate, and this guy Latchmere regularly puts his pocket money into the fund to try and save the gate. And so it's a coincidence that in later years, when he becomes a Conservative member of Parliament, that he takes great interest in starting up the order again. Now, there is no chance that the order can go back to being where it was before, because the order of Malta, as it is now known, is a Catholic order, and obviously England is still predominantly Anglican. But in order to ensure that to try and bring something similar to its beginnings, Latchmere takes a great interest in first aid, basically. The care of workers at factories and at railway stations, and so sets up the Red Cross, which then goes on to become the St John's Ambulance. And here again we can see that cross which I'm wearing around my neck and has been ever present since the beginning of the order. Back into the middle of the action, Malta. The Knights of St John have successfully protected the island until 1798, when they are finally removed by a Christian, believe it or not. Napoleon Bonaparte attacks the island and removed the Knights. They, for a brief time, are adopted by Tsar Paul I of Russia. He likes the idea of being a chivalric knight. He's disliked by his people and is eventually murdered. And at this point, around 1800, the order is given a final home in Rome, close to the Vatican, and they're given a new name, Sovereign Military Order of Malta. So we can see here the changes that are made. Again, we're back at Clerkenwell. I'm jumping between the two now. Changes now are made at Clerkenwell. There are changes to the building, the fabric of Cross's original building, which were made by Norman Shaw, which you'll know from Norman Shaw House, the original Scotland Yard and the embankment, and also John Aldridge Scott, one of the Scott dynasty of architects who did most of the interior, which you'll see here. Aldridge Scott was also responsible for building Norwich Cathedral and the Russian Orthodox Church over in Bayswater. So what you saw then, that's the chapter room, and then this here is the council chamber. Yeah. So that's up to date. We are there. You are looking at the St John's Gate up to date. That room there is set out for, you can hire the place for weddings and bar mitzvahs, I would imagine. And that's me finished. I hope you enjoyed this video, and keep safe, stay safe, keep alert apparently, and keep an eye on your alcohol intake. I'll see you soon. Bye bye.